Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a premier field engineer specializing in management technologies. Today's discussion is part 11 of a series focused on ConfigMgr Current Branch and the Microsoft Cloud, Azure. The focus of today's discussion specifically is co-management. Here's our agenda. Talk through what is co-management, why we care about it, and then get into the requirements and how it works, and finally end up configuring and watching co-management work in action. Let's jump in. So what really is co-management? So whenever the idea of modern management first was introduced, there was a lot of interest from customers to try to understand it, to get their arms around it, but they were a little bit, well, not a little bit, in a pretty big way, stymied because they were faced with a choice. Either manage with ConfigMgr or manage with modern management, not both, right? If a ConfigMgr client was installed on a system that had been enrolled in Intune, then that ConfigMgr client would remove the Intune enrollment. So it really was one versus the other. That blocked a lot of people. And so realizing that and realizing the interest was there to help build a bridge to modern management, and not really a wholesale shift to modern management for many scenarios, co-management came to be. So starting in Windows 10, 1709, and ConfigMgr 1710, the idea of co-management was born. And that idea is to allow a device to be managed by both ConfigMgr and Intune at the same time, and have controls over what specifically ConfigMgr will do, what Intune will do, and you'll see all of that as we go forward. Right? This idea of co-management is that you can manage the workloads with whatever tool makes the most sense, gives you a path toward modern management, gives you a road that you choose what scenarios, what time frame, etc., that this whole thing fits into, right? And so it really unblocks the customer from being able or not being able to go down the modern management route. So there's kind of a vision that co-management is a bridge, and it really is, from traditional to modern management without losing on either side. And so there's two scenarios that we think about for co-management. The first is, if you have devices that are managed currently by ConfigMgr, then co-management is a path to MDM. And I put Intune there on purpose because specifically with co-management, you have to have Intune, right? Now, you could actually manage a device with another MDM vendor and ConfigMgr simultaneously, but that is not co-management. That is coexistence, and there is a very big difference, right? If you have a device that's MDM managed, in that case Intune as well, then co-management is a path to help get to ConfigMgr, so you can have the best of both worlds. So why do we care? Right, well, one is Windows 10 as a device. So Windows 10 is that unique system that can be viewed and leveraged as a traditional PC, and it can also be viewed and leveraged as a device, similar to an iPad or something like that, right? And so if you're viewing your Windows 10 systems as a device, that Windows 10 system may lean toward a modern management type of scenario, but you still might have some things in the ConfigMgr world that ConfigMgr provides that would benefit in terms of managing that device. So hybrid management comes into play, right? Co-management offers that ability to pick the best tool to deliver the management experience best that you need in whatever scenario that you're in, right? One thing, too, about this, there are certain features that you will only get in Intune. So in a co-managed scenario, those features in Intune can be accessible to you without anything more than just co-managing a device. And I'll give you an example of that here, just verbally, and I'm sure I'll mention it again as we go along, right? Probably a couple of times, because this is important. So if you take a device, a Windows 10 device that is currently ConfigMgr managed, and you co-manage it, which means it enrolls in Intune, but you do not shift any workload at all, and these terms will become clear as we go along, there are certain things you get, right? such as conditional access, such as some remote capabilities of wipe and things of that nature. Again, we'll describe some more of those in more detail a bit later. Right? Essentially, with hybrid management, you break down the roadblocks to moving to modern management and starting to explore that before you again had to choose. So again, modern management, not delayed, but today. Co-management allows you to implement modern management where it makes sense, even if it's just enrolling in Intune, without giving up anything that traditional management provides, which is really important because there's a lot of organizations around the world that have invested a lot of effort, a lot of time in building out very robust management solutions through ConfigMgr, right? Also, the ability to do this co-management thing where you have ConfigMgr and Intune together is a great way to gain experience, to test, to think through your transition, and again, take the best of both worlds and remove modern management roadblocks. Yeah, we've talked about that enough already. So, and then I put an additional option, but very important option. So here's one thing to call out as well. If you're considering modern management, then co-management is a means to get you there in a controlled way. So I sometimes hear the question, what about if you have a cloud management gateway along with the ConfigMgr client? Isn't that doing effectively what co-management does without having to bolt on Intune, right? Well, it's an understandable question, but the answer is you absolutely still need to be considering co-management and modern management with Intune, right? For a few reasons. Modern management is a great option for certain workloads today, and it's getting better all the time. Plus, with modern management, there's zero requirement to maintain infrastructure, either on-prem or in Azure. So if you're in a place that you can investigate modern management and maybe make the shift to modern management and that totally meets your needs, then this helps you realize that that possibility and move in that direction. Will that be true for most or even for all or even most environments? Maybe not. But if you realize that, then there's significant advantages from just moving totally over to modern management. Thinking about ConfigMgr Client and the Cloud Management Gateway, if that combination meets your needs today, then we've got you covered. But that's not an argument to avoid considering modern management, because modern management is continuing to add capabilities all the time, capabilities that are unique to modern management and so forth. And already alluded to, there are certain capabilities that are only going to be available with Intune that will strongly benefit environments where devices need to be managed and so forth. We'll, again, detail those here in just a bit. Okay. So what are the requirements of co-management? Well, you have to have Intune, right? Again, already said this. If you're going to co-manage, it is not something that you can do with third-party MDM providers. It is going to require Intune, right? You can coexist using third-party MDM providers, but there's challenges there. Co-management absolutely requires Intune. You need Windows 10, 1709 or better. You need Azure Active Directory Premium, because with co-management, we're going to be doing some enrollment and different things that will benefit you with Azure Active Directory Premium. EMS and Intune with the MDM authority set to Intune. Now today, there's really no other option. The authority has to be set to Intune, MDM authority. I mentioned that only because in versions past, you had the ability to have ConfigMgr be your MDM authority. Anyway, just mention that, but Intune set to be your MDM authority. You do need ConfigMgr 1710 or better. 1806 or later is actually probably the sweet spot. It lights up in 1710. In 1806, we allow you to be able to connect multiple instances of ConfigMgr to a single Intune tenant if that's of interest to you, right? In ConfigMgr, the Cloud Management Gateway, Cloud Distribution Point, absolutely not a requirement, but is recommended, right? So say it again, you don't have to have the Cloud Management Gateway or Cloud Distribution Point to realize co-management in ConfigMgr and Intune, but it is absolutely recommended. You're going to need the Azure AD Cloud Service and user discovery and ConfigMgr Client approval to be handled appropriately. And we'll talk about ConfigMgr Client approval more in a minute. Make decisions about user policy, and the ConfigMgr Client is going to be a key part of this as well. And then we always have to mention the L word, as I call it, licensing. You do need the appropriate licensing in order to be able to set all of this up. Okay, so let's get into some of the details about how this works, right? And I'm going to give you a couple of diagrams as we go along through this with the idea, again, of trying to help you understand how this works. And so this diagram is directly from our documentation, and it's a lot of pictures here to illustrate a point. On one side of your network, the on-prem part, you have ConfigMgr, and ConfigMgr will go about managing Windows 7 and 8, and you'll have other system servers and various things, right? ConfigMgr handles all that. You will also have Windows 10, and there will be the ConfigMgr client on Windows 10, right? Windows 10 is the system that kind of sits here in the middle of the whole thing, because on the other side of the network is the internet, and you have Intune here managing iOS and Android and Windows phones if you still have them, and so forth, right? But again, Windows 10 sitting right here in the middle, that is enrolled in Intune management. So it is being managed by ConfigMgr and Intune simultaneously, okay? So let's look at another one. So specifically, this diagram attempts to describe what actually happens if you start with ConfigMgr, start with devices that are managed by a ConfigMgr client that are being moved to Intune. So in this diagram, I am using the Cloud Management Gateway and the Cloud Distribution Point. Again, absolutely not a hard and fast requirement. It is recommended, so that's why I have it here. But just trying to paint a picture of how this would work. So first, co-management settings are going to be configured and deployed to a piloting collection or all systems in the environment. Again, these will come clear to you. The idea of these will come clear. So you would do that on the primary site. Those would move out, those instructions would move out to the management point and so forth that are out here, and then the clients would learn about them through the Cloud Management Gateway. So step number 2, the ConfigMgr client is going to receive the new settings. The client is automatically going to enroll in Intune and be configured with the appropriate actions and settings and workloads, etc. So that's what I'm illustrating here. We have a client. The client is receiving through the Cloud Management Gateway the instructions that it needs to be co-managed. It will then enroll itself into Intune, right? And then communicate back the fact that it's co-managed and all that's handled. Step number 3, configured Intune policy is applied to the managed device, right? And so now this device is co-managed. So what about starting the other way? If we have devices that are already enrolled in Intune, but then need to have the ConfigMgr client put on them. Same kind of diagram, little bit of different picture here. So first, the Intune is going to install the ConfigMgr client on MDM managed devices using the client install command line provided by the ConfigMgr Cloud Management Gateway. Again, not required, but it is recommended, right? So here, Intune drops down the ConfigMgr client. The ConfigMgr client installs to the ConfigMgr site through the Cloud Management Gateway. It gets connected through here, right? And then finally, the client receives co-management settings and other policy and different things through ConfigMgr is the idea, right? So those are the 2 big scenarios, ConfigMgr to Intune or Intune to ConfigMgr. I want to show you one more, right? Because we just in the previous session talked about autopilot. And I want to show you how this fits in to autopilot. So in the autopilot session, had a few graphics that were trying to illustrate the idea of exactly the flow of how the client got joined or autopiloted, enrolled in Intune, got the client on it, and so forth. This is a similar kind of diagram, but just put together a little bit differently since I'm just showing it to illustrate a kind of how it works scenario here. So again, co-management is something that can happen as a part of autopilot and bring to you the benefits of co-management realized through the automation and the convenience of autopilot. So what happens? So if you have a device here, if you have autopilot, the device is going to be powered on by the end user or by the tech, whatever. The device is going to enter out-of-box experience setup. It's going to contact the autopilot service, realize that it is actually autopilotable, and then go through the specific out-of-box experience that's been configured for it by the administrator. Then step 2, the device, after the user logs into the device, or there's actually other scenarios where the user doesn't have to log into the device, as we talked about during the autopilot session, the device is going to be enrolled to and configured by Intune. And here in the user-driven scenario, the user will sign in with their username and password, device is automatically enrolled, Intune applies all the configurations and so forth. Well, one option, again, ConfigMgr is not necessarily part of autopilot. In other words, ConfigMgr is not integral to get autopilot to work, but in some environments it may be, right? Because otherwise, you might have all these great configurations out there in ConfigMgr that you don't yet have replicated into Intune. Maybe you're working on that, but you don't have it done yet. So maybe your entire autopilot experience is to autopilot the device, let the user sign in, get out of the UBI experience, let the Intune agent get enrolled, and then as a part of the Intune agent, said Intune agent, there is no Intune agent. As a part of Intune enrollment, then policy will come down to the device to install the ConfigMgr client. Then the ConfigMgr client's there, so it can go to ConfigMgr and get whatever policies are ready for it in terms of software distribution, whatever configurations that are out there, right? That's step 3. Again, optional, but very, very handy, right? And then again, if you have Azure AD authentication, then you don't have to have any client certificates at all, and it just works. And that's a beautiful solution, because with autopilot, we're going to have the device that is joined to Azure, and so you just have a very seamless experience with getting this thing to work. Okay. Scenarios, right? Transitioning to modern management. We talked about this. You can transition partially, where it makes sense, do a partial transition of certain things to modern management. You can do a full transition to modern management if you want to, right? In that case, you would argue that the ConfigMgr client would start to phase out on those systems, right? Which is okay if modern management gives you what you need. So whenever you think about co-management, or when we think about co-management, there's a couple of scenarios. You can probably add more that I think about. One would be focused use devices, such as kiosks or retail systems that are acting as tablets or devices. I think of certain retail stores now where salespeople will walk around with a tablet, working with customers and so forth. Could be a Windows 10 device acting as a tablet, and you can fill in your other scenarios there. Could be off-network devices. This would be where you only have an internet connection, and so that device can really only be managed by Intune or ConfigMgr using the Cloud Management Gateway, but you can fully manage that device with all of the options and bells and whistles that are needed. You can have workers that are not based in a corporate office that you need to manage, and the combination of Intune and ConfigMgr makes that very seamless and very good. And then ConfigMgr plus MDM only capabilities. I didn't know exactly where to put this, but this is kind of revisiting the idea of what if you have a ConfigMgr client and you've managed with ConfigMgr very effectively for years, and you're looking at this modern management scenario and think, well, I can maybe not have to do the modern management scenario by just using my Cloud Management Gateway. That gives me what I need, and I don't really see the benefit of having Intune. Well, let's talk about that for a minute, right? And as you'll see coming up, there's the idea of enabling a device for co-management, which will cause the enrollment in Intune. If you're on the ConfigMgr client side and you enable that device for modern for co-management, that device will become enrolled in Intune. You'll see that in a minute. But you don't necessarily have to shift any workloads over to that on that device to Intune at all if you don't want to, right? So the question then becomes, what advantage is there to me as an organization for co-managing a device if I'm not shifting any workloads? And that's a great question, and I would absolutely encourage you to investigate what workloads make sense, but let's walk through a few things, right? If you simply go through the process on the ConfigMgr side of enabling co-management and letting your devices enroll in Intune, then you get a few things immediately. First, conditional access that includes device compliance. You get Intune-based remote actions, such as restart, remote control, factory reset, right? You wouldn't have these otherwise, okay? Centralized visibility into device health. You can link users, devices, and apps with Azure Active Directory. You can do modern provisioning with Windows Autopilot. Just showed you that in the previous slide. If you have unhealthy ConfigMgr clients, now you have those systems managed by Intune as well. And so you could have the opportunity to intervene on those devices through Intune to get the client, the config manager side, back to a state of health, right? So there's a number of options that are out there that you get immediately to benefit you if all you do is enable a device for co-management without shifting one workload, okay? Again, you'll see more of this as we go along. So let's start to get into the fun stuff, right? Co-management, how you actually think about this today and tomorrow. So today, the demos you're going to see are on version 18.10 of ConfigMgr. There are 7 workloads that can be shifted or evaluated to shift between modern management and ConfigMgr client, right? I'll show you those. This is a space of continual innovation. So not sure what tomorrow will bring, but almost certainly you will see additional innovation, right? You will see possibly additional workloads, right? You will see the plan continue to unfold to help you on the journey to modern management. As modern management continues to take shape, this will allow you to continue to have a bridge to move that way. Again, not on anyone's timetable but your own, when it makes sense for you, okay? So that said, let's actually go through what it looks like to enable co-management. We're going to do that in the 2 scenarios we've talked about, going from ConfigMgr, starting with ConfigMgr, and enabling co-management so that ConfigMgr clients can enroll in Intune. Then we're going to look at configuring Intune so that any devices enrolled just in Intune, Windows 10 devices that are not ConfigMgr managed can become ConfigMgr managed. So to do that, I'm actually going to pull in a lab environment that is not the one that is fully configured for co-management. This is just an environment I have around that I want to use to show you these initial configurations, right? I will shift over whenever we get further into it to my working environment and show you some things, but just a couple of things first. So we need to configure maybe a collection, right? So when we think about co-management, you have the option of doing a full-scale shift and implementing co-management across your entire production environment, which is unlikely that you're going to want to do that. Very likely you're going to want to start by piloting on a subsection of your managed devices, and maybe growing that subsection over time. So I'm going to walk through in this environment that, again, is not the one that's configured for co-management. I'm going to take you a certain way down the path here, and then we'll shift over to that other environment. So here, I don't have any collections configured for piloting. So what I'm going to do is go into my device node here. And again, I don't have any active clients, not a surprise in here, but I'm just going to go through the motions of creating a piloting collection. So say that I want to take these 4 and add them to a piloting collection. I'm just going to go add the selected items to a new device collection. Call this co-management piloting. And the limiting collection for that will be all systems. That's fine. You can do this however you want to. This is what I'm doing. And done. So now I have a piloting collection of devices that I can start to work with and evaluate for co-management, right? There's 4. And so once I have those systems in piloting, now, once I have those systems in piloting, and they need to be systems of a certain characteristic, right? Then we can go forward and start to build out co-management. So I will come back to the collections once I get into my working environment, but let's go build out co-management. So if I am on the administration node, I can go to Cloud Services and I can click on co-management. There's nothing configured here. I'm going to right click and say configure co-management. And so from here, first thing I need to do is sign in. So I'm actually going to sign in to my Intune tenant that is already configured in my other environment. Because again, in ConfigMgr 1806 or better, you can actually have multiple config manager environments to one Intune tenant. All right, so let's sign in here. If I can get this thing to type. Come on, there we go. Bit of a long username. There we go. Hopefully I typed that correctly. And I did. Okay, so I'm just linking in with my Intune environment, and so I can proceed through the wizard. So we have that done. Right, then I can click Next and choose my environment. So here in my environment, I'm going to decide what kind of automatic enrollment in Intune do I want. So do I want to configure it so that none of my devices are going to automatically enroll in Intune? Do I want to configure it so that my pilot devices are going to automatically enroll in Intune, or all? You can do what you like. The most likely choice is to start with pilot. So I'm going to choose pilot, right? And then notice, because you're going to see a difference here in a minute, there is no cloud management gateway set up. And so I don't have anything here to kind of tell me how to do the client configuration and so forth for a co-managed environment. When we get to my other environment, you will see there is a cloud management gateway configured, and you will see that there's a client command line here that I can just lift and put over into Intune to enable co-management there, and I'll show you all that, right? But I don't have it here, and I've mentioned that co-management is not a strict requirement. It's not. Why? Because I can click Next and go forward without blocking on that page. Then I have the workloads that I can choose to shift, right? There are 6 here. There's 7 with 1810. This is an 1806 environment, right? And then finally, once I choose or don't choose whatever workloads to shift, remember, because again, there is no requirement to shift any workload at all in order to get certain benefits out of co-managed scenarios. Then I choose what collection. So I'm going to browse to my pilot collection that I chose or created just a minute ago, co-management piloting, and then I would click Next and I would say OK, and that would initiate the clients starting to enroll in Intune, those clients that are in my piloting collection. So that's as far as I'm going to go with that environment. Instead, I'm going to pull in my environment that is actually configured for co-management, and we'll walk through that. I want to show you quickly everything that's already built out. So if I go to Assets and Compliance and look at my device collections, I do have a co-management enabled a pilot for that. I have one device here, right? Ultimately, I will have 2 devices here, but I start with one because in my lab right now, I do have one Windows 10 device that is fully already gone through the process for co-management. It is this one right here, LabServe 10-1. You see it has a green check mark, and we're good to go. Now, the devices that I'm going to have in my collection will be Windows 10 1709 or better, right? In my case, they're 1809. They will be Azure AD joined devices, right? Because then I can use them with co-management without having to use certificates, right? And there's more discussion with that. Go see the, sorry, I said I can use them with co-management. I can use them with the Cloud Management Gateway without certificates. Go reflect on the Cloud Management Gateway session if you want to review that. And I do have a Cloud Management Gateway implemented. It's running, it's ready to go, and so I will be making use of that in my demo. Again, don't have to, but it's here, and I'm going to be using it. All right, and in my case, you know, again, I have the piloting collection. I can start with that. You can start with that in your environment, and as you get more confident and want to include more systems, you can add to that piloting collection. You can go in and shift out and change your piloting collection if you want to, no problem. If you go full production, then no piloting collection is required. If you're not piloting, then every config manager client out there, every Windows 10 config manager client that's eligible will get the co-management settings. All right, so let's look at my co-management that's set up. So I showed you how to set it up. I've actually got it set up here already. Let's go to properties on it. And so here you will see that there's no sign-in because I've already taken care of that, but you'll see this enablement. So I'm letting my pilot machines enroll in Intune. Here's the command line. Right? Now, if you've worked with this at all in previous versions of Config Manager, there were earlier versions where the command line provided to install a client through the Cloud Management Gateway was more complex than this. Right? So again, there are multiple ways you could add to this command line, but this command line, as you will see, is perfectly satisfactory for use in a environment that has a Cloud Management Gateway. So you can copy that and put that into Intune. We'll do that in a minute. I do not have any workloads at all shifted. So you see, this is 1810. There's 7 choices here, right? And so I don't have any workloads shifted. Again, I will get the benefit of being co-managed, even though I don't have any workloads shifted here. We can shift those at any point, right? And what does shifting a workload really mean? Shifting a workload means that Intune will fully take responsibility for that workload, and the Config Manager client will stop servicing it, right? So bear that in mind as you shift, right? That's the beauty of co-management, because otherwise there would have to be really tight coordination between the Config Manager team and the team running an MDM provider to make sure you don't step on each other, right? Kind of deal. Okay. And then finally on my staging page, I've included my piloting collection, and so I should be good to go. So that's all that's required for setting up co-management in Config Manager. One other thing that's interesting is you can view your XML definition of the different configurations and such that's implemented, right? Just to see that. So essentially that's what goes down and tells the system what to do, etc. Okay, so we've done that from Config Manager. That's enabling from the Config Manager side. How do we do the same from Intune? Well, let's bring in the Intune console. Okay, so Intune is really pretty easy. So all we need to do is go into the Intune console, and all I really need to do here is create a group that will contain my Intune only enrolled systems that I want to move toward co-management, and I also need to create a client app. So I'm going to show you the group first because I've got a group here. And what I've called it is here, devices for co-management. If I go into this group, all I have in it right now is one device, okay, right here. And so that device is enrolled in Intune. It has not got the Config Manager client on it, and we are going to move that device toward co-management. Well, in all truth, that device has already been provisioned for co-management. We will add another device in here a little bit later to show the process actually work. Okay? So let's go back. The other thing I need to do is create an application. This application, client app, will simply and totally install the Config Manager client on devices that I'm destining for co-management. Looks like I have 2 here. I actually forgot to delete one. We'll clean that up before we go along, but nevertheless, I'll show you here. So all I did was I imported the Config Manager client into Intune. Well, how did I do that? This is not using CCM setup like you would typically for installing the client, right? CCM setup.exe. No, instead, this is using CCM setup.msi. So if I go into the properties of it, you will see that it is CCM setup.msi. It is a line of business app that I've created, and there's some configuration I do. Well, let's start with CCM setup.msi and pull this out and go back to the Config Manager console for a minute. Where do I get the CCM setup.msi? It's right here under my Config Manager directory bin i386. This MSI is only usable for installing the client through Active Directory GPO and through Intune. Right? So this is what I need. That's all I need. lift that out, and then we will be able to import that into Intune through this wizard. So that's how I got this. Right? Once I have that, then I'm going to go configure. There's just a couple of things that I need. I need a name, I need a description, and publisher, and so forth. And what else do I need is this command line. And that command line comes directly from my co-management setup. Now, your command line may not come directly from here because you may or may not have the Cloud Management Gateway, or you may or may not want to just stick with that command line. But in this example, that's what we've got, right? And so now that I have that set up, then I have to assign or deploy the client, and I'm deploying it specifically to this group, devices for co-management, and nobody else, and I'm making it required, okay? And so that is as far as you have to go to set up co-management through Intune. All right, cool. So let's pull the lab out and move on. So that's enabling in both scenarios. Now, let's go see this actually work in action. So as we approach this, and this will be where we spend the bulk of our time, I want to walk you through the exact lab configuration that I have. This will be a little bit tedious at the beginning, but I want you to see how I have all of this configured. I've mentioned already that I have two systems that are in co-managed configuration. One started in ConfigMgr and was triggered to go into a co-management mode through the ConfigMgr client. The other started in Intune and was triggered to go into the co-management mode through Intune. So I want to show you both of those as we get started. So here is the Windows 10 system that started off as the ConfigMgr client, and want to show a few characteristics about it. So let's start in settings and show you that this is Windows 10 1809. Now 1809 is not required. You need to have 1709 or better, but this is 1809. Also, this machine is joined to Azure Active Directory. So if I go to Access Worker School and look, connected to Azure AD, this also does happen to be enrolled in Intune, as noted by the info button, because again, this machine is already in a co-managed configuration. Also, the ConfigMgr client is installed, since that was the mechanism by which we co-managed this device. So look at that. So here's the ConfigMgr client. It is enabled for co-management and so forth. So also, while we're here, in the on the ConfigMgr site server, we have the pilot collection, and this device is the only one in that pilot collection. So that's why it got enrolled in Intune and into that co-managed configuration. So I have a second Windows 10 machine here as well, and this one started in Intune and became co-managed through Intune. So same deal. Let's just go through and check a few characteristics of it. So this is looking at settings, and if we go to system and then finally about, it also is 1809 of Windows 10. And it also is joined to Azure AD, and it also is enrolled in Intune because that's again where it started, right? Connected to Tailspin Toys, enrolled in Intune, and so forth. It will also have the ConfigMgr client on it because this system is in a group in Intune that told it to install the ConfigMgr client. So here's the ConfigMgr client enabled for co-management, right? And so we'll get this out of the way and pull in the Intune console and look at it. So if we look at all devices, we will see both of these devices are in Intune and configured for co-management, as you see. Both of these devices are also in Azure AD. All right, and I do have to adjust a couple of items in the column display here so that we can actually accurately see what I want to see. All right, and so here's our activity. And these two devices that are showing recent connection, that's about right, what we would expect. Also rolling back, if we go to groups, I do have a group that I have one device in for co-management, devices for co-management. Look at members. That is the second device, 10-2. Okay, so those are the two systems ready to go. They are configured for co-management. Everything is working, no problem. So I have two other systems that we're going to use going forward in this discussion so that we can actually see co-management working. This one is one that has the ConfigMgr client on it, but is not enrolled in Intune. And so if I look at settings, and look at system about, it is 1809 of Windows 10. Okay, notice the name, LabServe 10-1-2, and if I click on Home and Accounts, Access Worker School, it is connected to Azure AD, but notice no info button here. It is not joined to or enrolled in Intune. If I look at the ConfigMgr client, it is here. Okay, look at ConfigMgr. We are currently internet, so we're communicating through the Cloud Management Gateway. We are disabled for co-management. Okay, and how do I know that we're communicating through the Cloud Management Gateway? Just a quick show you. In settings, the only network adapter that I have connected is my internet network adapter. And also, if we look in the ConfigMgr console, we will see that this device, 10-1-2, is actually connected, is showing a green check mark, so we know that it has to be communicating through the Cloud Management Gateway. And then last one, this one is enrolled in Intune, but not enrolled, oops, wrong one. Yeah, that's the wrong one, sorry. This one is enrolled in Intune, does not have the ConfigMgr client on it, so let's go to Settings, and System, About, again, Windows 10, 1809, go back to Home, go to Accounts, Access Worker School. We are joined to Intune with the info button, also in Azure AD. And if we pull in the Intune console, okay, so this is our group. This machine is not in the group, but if we go back and look at all devices, we will see that this device is in fact both devices are Azure AD joined. You're going to have to clear these columns so we can get a good clean view. Good enough. Both of the last two systems I just showed you, both of them are in Azure AD. Okay, so that this one and this one, right, both of them are active. But if I look at all devices, only this one shows up as Intune enrolled, and it is being managed purely by MDM. Okay. All right. So those are the systems we will continue with, kind of as we go forward into this. Okay. Now, in terms of the ConfigMgr server, again, I showed you that the piloting collection right now only has one system in it. So in order to make co-management effective on these devices, these two new devices that I showed you, we're going to go ahead and make some adjustments to the collection. Also, just kind of want to tour a little bit here. So a couple of things we're going to do. This device needs to be added to my pilot collection. So currently, only this device is in it. So I'm going to do this the easy way and simply right-click and add the selected device to an existing collection and choose the piloting collection. Sorry, got distracted. There we go. All right, piloting collection. So that's happening. Another thing that we're going to do, so that right there by itself is going to configure this client for co-management, as we'll see in just a minute. Another thing that we're going to note while we're here on the Intune enroll client, this is the command line that we're going to use to install the ConfigMgr client on that device that is just right now Intune enrolled, and you'll see that work. Okay, you can use whatever command line you want. Again, you don't have to use the Cloud Management Gateway for co-management, but I'm going to, since it's convenient to do so. And so I'm going to jump ahead with just that configuration. I'll do the Intune to Config Manager in just a second. So I'm going to pull in my Windows 10 system that was affected by that configuration, and we're going to open Control Panel and then the Config Manager applet. Here we go. Just to see, so we are currently disabled for co-management. Let's go look at the co-management handler log. In Windows, CCM, and then logs. Here is co-management handler right there. So let's open that up and see. So the device is not MDM enrolled yet. Waiting, so co-management flags updated. We'll let this go for just a second. Actually, before I do anything else, let me go kick a policy cycle. Actions, policy. All right. So cool. So that just triggered. So let's see. Scrolling down a little bit. Processing that we actually received this MDM enrollment initiated. MDM enrollment succeeded. So now we should have this device set up for co-management if we look in the Control Panel applet and refresh it. So let's go open that up. And in fact, it hasn't shown up here yet, but it should shortly. So let's just give it a little bit of time. But while we're waiting for that, let's go look in the settings app and see if we have any indication yet that this device has been provisioned over to Intune or enrolled in Intune. So we do. So the info button is here. So the MDM enrollment did in fact succeed. And so we know that the co-management took place. This hasn't reflected yet, but it should, as we go along. So I'm not going to wait for that. We'll continue, and we'll be coming back to this client a little bit later. But that actually took place, and we saw it. Now, one other thing just to mention while I'm here. So the first time you saw this machine, I was logged into it with a local account. Now I logged into it, I realized that, and I logged into it with an account that is authenticated against Azure AD, because if you don't do that, you'll see in the log that it's going to be waiting for a user to log on that is authenticating against Azure AD in order to go ahead, at least in some scenarios, to do the co-management scenario. All right, so while I'm here, just one more time, let's see if it will show me yet that this is reflecting as co-managed in the ConfigMgr applet. And it does. Okay, good. So I'm glad I checked back. So that completes this one. I don't have to worry about coming back to this one or not. I'll go ahead and minimize that. All right. So let's minimize ConfigMgr and pull back in Intune, and we'll go that route. All right, so I showed you the group. I showed you the group only has one device in it. So what I'm going to do is go ahead. Actually, let's see if I refresh this now. Do I see? Yeah, I have my other device right here that just became Intune enrolled. And so we're good to go. Now, let me go and go back to the group here for just a minute. So I showed you in my Intune configuration, this group configured for deploying the co-management configuration, and it only had one device. So I'm going to add another device, and that will trigger, well, maybe not as quickly. We'll probably have to manually intervene, but let's see. I believe it's this one. I'm going to add this device in, and we should be able to refresh that and see. Okay, good. So now we have this device that should be that is targeted now for getting the ConfigMgr client installed. So let's actually make sure that's the right device. This is my second Intune device that did not have the ConfigMgr client. In fact, I will still prove that because I haven't done what I need to do to actually get the client installed on it yet. So no ConfigMgr client. And let's make absolutely sure this is the right name. And it is. All right, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and trigger this device to install. Oh, and one other thing before I do that, let me show you in the settings that this, again, has only an internet connection. So the client install that you're going to see will have to use the Cloud Management Gateway. So if I go into settings, here under accounts, I'm going to also, let me just get ready in my file explorer here to look. But here I don't have any CCM set up. Let's go to this PC, look at Windows. There is no CCM setup here. So let's go back to settings, accounts, worker, school. Here I'm going to go to info, and here I'm going to trigger a sync. So we are now synchronizing against Intune. Since this device is now in that group, I should receive the instruction to install the ConfigMgr client, and we'll see. The sync takes just a second, and then we'll see what actually happens. So just waiting here and this doesn't happen instantly. It may take just a few minutes for things to show up here. I won't make you watch for that here on the video, but we'll come back as soon as that does show up. And CCM setup just came in right here. Should be cooking along pretty well here, so I'll just look at CCM setup. This will be a notepad, but we see files are starting to download, so we know we are actually communicating okay enough with the Cloud Management Gateway, at least to get the files to come down. Just searching here real quick for CMG. Yeah, so here I see a reference that I'm using my Cloud Management Gateway, and so we'll let this continue set up for a bit, and then once it finishes, just check one more time in it, make sure we don't have any errors. So it's progressing and doing a bits download of the file. So I'll come back in a minute when the client's installed, and we will check it all out. All right, and so CCM setup has now completed. We got an exit code of 0. We should have the client pointed to our site server now. And if I refresh this, actually close it and reopen it. Let's see if we have the client. We should. There it is. All right, and if we look, the site code hasn't shown up yet, but it should if we give it just a little bit more time. So just kind of watching the client install along the way, and we'll let it progress further and be back in a sec. All right, so we do have the site code showing up now as we progress, so we'll give it more time. Now, one thing that I want to point out here, it's a good time to do so. Let me pull back in the ConfigMgr site server for just a minute and go back to Assets and Compliance. So here, if we look at our list of devices, we don't yet have the device in that I'm looking for. All right, so I'm going to, actually, here it is. Yeah, it came in. So here's one thing about this device, and this may not be true in every configuration, but it's true in mine. The device is Azure AD joined. It is not on-prem AD joined, right? And so the implication of that is in ConfigMgr by default. Let me take you over to sites for just a second. By default, site configuration, sites. If we go into the properties of the site, here, actually not here, always do that, to hierarchy settings, and here look at client approval. By default, automatically approve computers in trusted domains. Mine is not in a trusted domain, meaning on-prem domain. I can choose manually approve each computer, or, which would be a real pain, or I can automatically approve all computers, which would allow my computer, which is not on-prem AD joined, to be automatically approved. I don't want to do that, and so instead I have to come here, right-click, and approve this client. Otherwise, it will never fully install. Right? So that's why I'm still hung here, just kind of at this state, waiting for things to come along. So to now make that go faster because I'm waiting on it, I'm going to go and restart the client service. Shouldn't take that long if I just leave it alone, but I'm going to go ahead and restart the client service so that we can go ahead and get registered and finish up the client install process. But at this stage, you've seen that the client software did install, and it is in the ConfigMgr console, and all I have to do is approve it, and so essentially the client install process is done. So we will just kind of move on from this point and come back to this here in just a second. All right, so the client server's restarted, and now looking back at the control panel applet after a little bit of a break, we are good to go. The client is enabled for co-management, so I will consider this one a success, and we will move it out of the picture because we really don't need it any longer, and pull in the ConfigMgr console just to show it's there. This is probably a little bit behind, hasn't fully caught up yet with the green check mark. Oh, there we go. Okay, just a refresh, and we're good to go. So we are fully communicating. Again, success, and that one coming from Intune and installing the ConfigMgr client that way, and we're good to go. Okay, so at this stage, we have two clients that we have enabled for co-management, one of them coming from the ConfigMgr side, and the other one coming from the Intune side. For the rest of this, it really doesn't matter which client we use, because they are, all of them, all four now, enabled for co-management. So what I want to do now is go back into the ConfigMgr console, and I want to shift a workload to Intune instead of ConfigMgr. So under Administration, I'm going to go under Co-Management, open up Properties, and then on the Workloads tab, now I'm going to choose to shift a workload to Pilot Intune. And that's going to be right here, and that's all I'm going to do. Actually, before I hit Apply, just want to call your attention to one thing. So I'm going to go back to one of my test clients. I'll just pick this one since it's the one that's well, I don't care about that, so another time, that's fine. So I'm going to go back to this, because again, it doesn't really matter which one at this stage. And call your attention to co-management capabilities set to 1, right? So again, all that has happened on this device is that it's been enabled for co-management, it has enrolled in Intune, and the capabilities is set to 1. Let me pull this back out of the picture for a minute. So I'm going to shift this workload to Windows Update to Intune. Oh, one more thing, real quick. Let me just do this just to make sure. Okay, so under Settings, if we go into Accounts and look at Info under Access Worker School, then we will see what specific areas are actually being managed by Intune. And so we don't really see anything here right now, but let's go see. Actually, you know what? That's not going to indicate because I haven't actually configured anything in Intune. Forgot about that. But either way, we'll see the effect that I'm wanting to see as we go along. So I'm going to hit Windows Update Agent and apply that, and that's it. And so now Windows Update policies will no longer, once the client receives the notification, will no longer be managed by ConfigMgr. They will be managed totally by Intune. So let's pull the client back in, and I'm going to go in and trigger a policy on it. Okay, so machine policy run now. Should be enough time, and then go into the co-management handler log again, and watch what happens. Okay, so new merged values. Okay, let's see, new capabilities. Just waiting on it for just a minute. All right, and just saw the log update. So we saw a little bit, yeah, right up here. So let me find where we were. Devices provisioned, machine. Okay, so here's where we were before the settings came in. So merging workload flag 17 with 1. Now the co-management capabilities is 17, right? So that number doesn't really mean anything to you, except you noticed it changed right when I made the workload shift. So now if I close that and reopen it, we will see the capabilities has shifted to 17, which indicates that this is not just an agent that is enrolled in Intune. It actually has at least one workload shifted, right? Now, I'm not going to go through every single one and what the capabilities will be, right? That's kind of beyond what we want to talk about, but just wanted to show that to you. There's some additional validation we can do as well. So if I open up Registry Editor and browse down to local machine, that's not what I want. Up to CCM is where I want. Microsoft CCM. There. If I can get it to work for me. So refresh that. Open up. So we have in here the flag under CCM, co-management, indicating 17. So that's a good way to correlate it as well in the registry. And there's other settings there that you can look at. If you want to look also while you're in the registry, there's an MDM registry key that will kind of show you any kind of policies that are coming down from Intune. So if we navigate there, let's go back up, local machine software, Microsoft Policy Manager. So let's go to Policy Manager right here. We have the current MDM settings. We also have the default MDM settings. There we go. And so current for the device, any kind of different things there. So just that section is specifically for MDM, and not to be undone or outdone, we can do the same thing through WMI and correlate there as well. So connect, root, CCM, policy, machine, actual config. I always forget that. I need to run this as admin. Apologies. Let's do that again. And this time run as admin. Okay. Connect, root, CCM, and then policy, machine, actual config, good enough. And then classes, recursive. And I usually look at WMI with WMI Explorer these days, but I don't have that on this machine, so we're doing it old school. So CCM co-management configuration right here. Instances, there we go. And show them off. So it'll show you the current configurations that are out there and so forth, right? For it. There's other stuff that we can find there too, but nevertheless. All right. So back out of there. And now that we actually have the device managed by Intune, we have shifted some workloads. I do want to actually go back in the settings app because I do think probably as a result of what we've been doing, we'll have some stuff in there. So back under accounts, access worker school, and then under info, you will see what actually is being managed by Intune. And you'll see, look, updates, right? And so that's a really good way to see what's actually coming from Intune, what's actually coming from ConfigMgr. Good way to differentiate that. Another way is to use the advanced diagnostic report. So we can create that report. It's going to be under documents. I'm going to export that, and then I can just open it up in a browser, and it will allow me to see the various settings that are in place and who did them and where they are and so on, right? So that's a really good place to find some additional detail if needed. And so the journey is near the end. So we have all these clients now managed and co-managed between ConfigMgr and Intune. So let's do a couple more places and we will be done. So let me pull in the Intune console again. All right. And so now, just as a reminder, you've already seen this, but just as a reminder, if we go back to our device list, all devices, here, right here, we will now should see all 4 devices listed as managed by Intune, and we do, and all 4 of them are managed by ConfigMgr and MDM, which means they are co-managed, so we are good to go from that perspective. And then back in the ConfigMgr console for just a sec. One other place to monitor this is under monitoring, and if we scroll down, we have a co-management dashboard. So this will show us client distribution, and this is probably all messed up numerically because it is my lab and I do a lot of funny things here. But we'll see we have 50-50, according to the dashboard, clients that are not eligible for co-management. And then we have these that are Windows 1709 and above, so should be ready to go. And these, this kind of distribution of devices that are enrolled and scheduled and so on, the enrollment status of success, no errors, we see the workloads that have been shifted. So in this case, you'll see Intune enrolled without workload is the primary one. I just recently shifted the workload for Windows Update, so it doesn't show up here yet, right? So that is very useful to help you keep track of how co-management is working in your environment. And that said, we're done here, right? That is co-management. Very, very useful to evaluate for Windows 10. If you have it, check it out. It's really not that hard to set up. And we will wrap this session and see you next time.